Well, from the past, my mentor, Chef Damien Brown, he gave me my first shot. He's an Australian man, and he came up through the Australian government's hospitality program. And he designed the way that he ran the kitchen as a learning kitchen. Everything counted for paying guests, which gave us the real life experience right away. And so it really instilled in me that every time I put down my cutting board, everything had to be very systematic. I had to know where everything was, my mise en place, everything in its place. Everything had to be just so I could move efficiently because guests are waiting. And so it instilled in me a really strong work ethic to do things kind of from a checklist standpoint, but not so much ticking off, but just keeping you sharp. So he was really the focus was on organization of the kitchen with him for sure. As far as learning to cook, that happened day to day. Of course, that's why I was there. Um, Other mentor, Chef Leonard Raday, he is instrumental in my sommelier training and continues to push me even to this day. We've become very good friends and colleagues. And he inspires me even now to push myself with creativity, presentations, knowledge. I'm dabbling in perhaps trying to become a cicerone, which is like a beer sommelier. So there's just a whole world of things in gastronomy that it just, you live it day to day because we have to eat to live. I find myself fortunate enough to be in a vocation and a society where we can live to eat. So, as far as a past influence and a present and future, those two gentlemen in particular. And then there's some celebrity chefs that I don't admire or put up on a pedestal as far as being a hero or anything like that, but there's very strong influences and inspirations from people like Tom Douglas, who are very self-made, really strong work ethic, always pushing themselves. I've had the opportunity to meet him a few times. Doubtful he would remember me because it was in a large setting, but very influential. Just that handshake, nice to meet you, thanks for coming. I mean, very personal. It didn't seem fabricated response. It seemed like a real genuine response. So from that standpoint, it's those folks helped instill in me a work ethic, to have a list of priorities to give to my clients. Do what you say you're going to do. Do the best you can to make their experience the best you can. And then thirdly, don't compromise your morals with the first two. So that's how I've managed to be successful, I think. And success is measured however personally you want to attain and achieve something. Yeah, you get to tour a place without actually being able to go there. Sometimes financially, it's not really feasible for us to go through a 2-week tour of the Loire. But if we're teaching about it, we can spend 10 weeks talking about one region, the cuisine, the history, which I'm a huge fan of. I think we need to know where we've been to get to where we need to go. And what wine was like even 40 years ago is not what it's like today. I mean, the things that we have now, vinification processes, technology, yeast structures that are fine-tuned for each particular grape and varietal. There's so much more advantage that we have now as consumers. So it's great to kind of see the transitions and go through the flow of an area and concentrate just on that spot. And you can spend 5 lifetimes studying gastronomy and wine, and it's still not enough. That's what's great about it. That's why I smile all the time. I get to go to Gascony one day. The next week I get to go to Bordeaux. The next week maybe we're going to go through southwestern Spain. The next week maybe we go through northern Italy. And it's an adventure on your palate. It's a great way to learn a little bit more about a different culture, which is, I think, very appealing to a lot of people that just don't have the opportunity to travel. And my hope is that maybe I inspire them. Start a little culinary bucket list and say, I want to eat in Santorini in Greece because of the wonderful white wines and the olives and the alfresco cuisine. And then while I'm there, maybe I can take a boat to the mainland. Maybe I can go to Turkey and go through a med cruise and head up into France. And I mean, just then your imagination just starts to go crazy. And for me, I have to get reeled in myself in class sometimes. So I'm like, okay, we need to plan out next year's student trip, and this is the and it just gets out of hand sometimes, but in a good way, out of hand in a good way. Uh, it's that moment where you're called into the general manager's office and you don't have that feeling of dread. And I say that in jest. I made the transition really fast. I was an apprentice and then became sous chef right away at my first stop out of my apprenticeship. And that was when I was at Stimson Green Mansion up on Capitol Hill. Chef Rodney Skinner gave me a shot over probably some candidates that were better qualified. But there was just some rapport that we had right away that we could work well together. And we did I was there for about a year and a half. Wonderful experience, and he didn't really handcuff me creatively. He also pushed me and gave me the chance to run a kitchen. It was a little intimidating for me at first because I was in charge of people who were literally twice my age. So, to come up with someone 25 years your senior and give them a task to do, that was really tough. But because I had that really strong foundation from Chef Damien, they saw that I practiced what I preached. So, when being a chef that's classically trained, you learn technique. That's the biggest thing. You learn how to braise properly. You learn how to saute. You learn how to do patisserie. You learn how to do all sorts of different processes and tasks in the kitchen so you can be well-rounded. And then when you have technique down, then you start to study gastronomy, indigenous ingredients from different areas, the difference between Gascony and Dijon, the difference between the general cuisine of Spain versus the general cuisine of Italy. Both cuisines are influenced by the same cultures, but to see the subtle differences because of what grows there. So then you take kind of what's commonly used in each native dish, if you will, and you add your own little flair, but all paying homage to classically Escoffier-influenced techniques in particular, the father of modern cooking. There's an influence to answer our first question, someone whom I've never met because he's been dead for many years, but every chef up and coming, every chef that's been a chef for 40, 50 years, owes a debt of gratitude to that man for codifying the language of the kitchen, teaching you as a young cook. If chef says, hey, I need 4 cups mirepoix, you can say that's it. You can go to any kitchen and know what that means. You learn a language. So as far as that goes, I mean, it's learning the technique is the most valuable thing in my career was during my apprenticeship, learning technique and then being able to translate it to any cuisine throughout the world. It's just knowing what grows there and what they use as their base ingredients and translating it into your own cuisine. Definition of cuisine is who's cooking what in the kitchen. So, yeah, autumn is upon us, and it's my favorite time of year because I really like to braise. I love braising. I'm not a purist in that I don't have to do everything in a Dutch oven, and I still sear things. But I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a business owner, I'm a teacher. There's a lot of things to handle, so I can't be there for all the time. So a crock pot, wonderful tool, long forgotten through the 90s and making a comeback now in the 21st century. Lots of people. I own like 5 crock pots, so it's great because I like to entertain at home too, so I can set things in and still do the same processes, but instead of doing it in the oven, I have a regulated temperature with a timer. I can tell my wife, honey, I need to go run an errand to the post office. I'm taking our son. The crock pot's on. It's going to go off at such and such a time. here's the timer to remind you, so when you're out in your studio, you can come in and turn it off. And it's a valuable tool. So, I mean, any stews, braised meats, really rich, hearty, robust, earthy foods, because they love beer and wine, and that's right in my personal wheelhouse as far as beverages of choice. And I like to have a beer with dinner. I like to have a glass of wine with dinner, and I like to prepare food that goes well with the types of wine I like to drink. Rich, earthy, fruit-forward, low-tannin wines, because they marry well with food. Oh yeah, every meal I cook. Yeah, if you think everything is perfect, you kind of become complacent, and then you start to slip. Then you start to, well, I can cut this corner here, or I can maybe leave that out, or I'm not going to taste it. It's going to be fine. And you always push yourself for perfection. Come close to the perfect plate, but I just haven't quite gotten there yet. Oh, sure. Many times in your career, you're the victim, if you will, for lack of a better description, of personal taste. The thing that I pride myself on is taking those necessary steps to make sure that you get the best quality ingredients you can, cook them to the proper temperature, cook them in the proper manner, so that it's well cooked to be presented, and then consumed where no one's going to firstly get ill, but it smells wonderfully. It was cooked properly. In your mind, it tastes delicious because you did everything right. But if someone just doesn't care for salmon, there's no preparation in the world that's going to overcome that. So I've had my fair share of that, and you take it with a grain of salt, because if you know that you didn't do anything wrong in the preparation, that's a personal palate that you have to overcome, and it's really impossible to do that. So, I don't take an affront. I apologize. Is there anything I can do to make it better? And I just didn't really care for it. And you think back to what you did, and if there's nothing that you did wrong, then you have to just. It's the nature of hospitality: is service with a smile no matter what, and you try to go back and think about what you did. And if it ends up just being personal taste, there's nothing you can do, and you just have to keep moving on. Because if you really let that eat you up inside, you're going to have a hard time making it in this business. You really will. Oh gosh, strangest place I've ever prepared a meal. I'm gonna say it was in a neighborhood north of Seattle, and it was kind of a weird situation in that it was paid for by someone else, so it was kind of a gift, if you will. But the folks that were consuming the meal had all the input as far as menu planning and so forth. And when I arrived, there was no one home, so that was a little bit off-putting. So as far as the strangest place, it was just ill-prepared. The kitchen was very small, so there wasn't a lot of room. And there was really no concession on their part to try to, we have a professional coming in, maybe we should put this away. You just do what you have to do. And I smile. I say, is it okay if I move this? It's going to be a few minutes. And so it's just I don't fault them. I just think it was a new experience, and the whole environment just seemed strange in that there was no one to greet me. And then there was like a lot of hustle and bustle. And when I finally got them to sit down, it ended up being a nice experience. But it was just plates stacked over here and just reaching for things. I was out. What are you gonna do? You have to just kind of roll with it, and that's that. So. I think they have their place in the entertainment world. I mean, for folks that enjoy the the celebrity that some chefs attain, if that's what inspires you as a cook, I mean, go for it. I don't really subscribe to that too much personally. I kind of enjoy my anonymity, if you will. I like being just dad at home. I like just being a husband to my wife, just being Jay. Uh, Chef Jay, I'm the same person now that I am at home, but here I am. I've donned my uniform. I'm here preparing a meal for you, and there's a certain professionalism that I have to do, and when I'm home, that's that. So As far as trying to get on one of those shows, I don't think it really appeals to me personally, because it's not really about cooking for someone. Really, it's about what's going on in the cameras, and more so, it's what's behind the scenes. That's the entertainment. So to me, it's more about television than it is about food, and I'd rather concentrate on the food for you. That's just me personally. It's not a knock on that. There's a lot of shows that are very popular. I just don't really take the time to watch very many of them. And if a friend of mine, which has happened, has been on, I try to follow them as best I can. But after like 10 minutes, I'm kind of like, I kind of want to switch to the ball game because I'm on my downtime. So, you know. Well, at the time, I was executive sous chef to a man named Valentino Lasiste, and it was in the private restaurant in the Women's University Club downtown Seattle. I had great opportunity to work for he and his predecessor, Daniel Roberts, really nurtured me. Tino took the handcuffs off of me, and my general manager at the time, Judy Donnelly, wonderful woman. We have a really good relationship to this day. She constantly checks on me, she makes sure I'm okay. I'm kind of like her surrogate son. Her son and I are the same age, so they kind of nurtured me, gave me raises, position, extra responsibility, and I got to a point where that was that. That's as far as I could go. So it was either move on to a lateral position in another place doing the same capacity job with the hopes that I could move up, or make that jump. And the further up the ladder I got, the further away I got from food, the further away I got from you, from the person I'm cooking for. You roll off the printer as a table for two or a table for four. It was anonymous. You were a blank face. I had to juxtapose in my mind what it would be like to sit there and watch you eat what you were being served. That, and I was, working about 75 hours a week, and just met my wife. We were dating. Hadn't yet got engaged. I was planning on, we were planning on getting engaged soon. And I looked at her and I said, we get married, you're not going to see me a lot because I work all the time. And she's like, oh, and I really like my wife. So I made the decision to go out on my own, kind of by accident, but out of necessity. Necessity in that I wanted to spend time with my wife. Accident in that a friend of mine had their catering company go under, and they were getting married in 3 months. Asked me if I could do the food. And I said, absolutely. Let me see what I can do. I altered my schedule. Everyone in the restaurant was very sympathetic to these folks, and like, that's not professional, et cetera, et cetera. So I took the reins, and with a cook friend of mine, just the two of us, we did a nice big buffet. They changed gears of what they wanted. They wanted a big sit-down dinner for 300. They realized that wasn't going to happen, so we did a nice big buffet, lots of stations with cheese and fruit and vegetable throughout, and they were able to enjoy their time. And they like, what do you want to charge us? And I kind of thought about what it would cost me for my labor and what it would cost for groceries and the time to set up and break down, etc. And I came up with a bill and I sent it to them, and they're like, oh, that seems more than reasonable. That's about on par with what we were going to pay, but we know you're going to show up because you're our friend. So, and I thought about, after all my expenses, paying my friend, all the food and so forth, I made twice my monthly salary with one event. And I thought, there's something here. How can I translate that into someone's home? Make the experience, all the things that I already do, cooking dinners, maybe some culinary education, personal cooking classes, and so forth. Started to do my research, came across being a personal chef. The United States Personal Chef Association was one of the organizations that I've joined. They kind of mentor you through a self-paced tutorial on what it means to kind of go out and be in business more so than be a cook, but being in business. And that was in 2005, and here we are today. I would say not necessarily a trend of style, but a trend of ingredient. Trying to stay local, sustainable, support our local agriculture. We've become a country of agribusiness rather than agriculture, and that's just my own opinion. I'm not going to step up on a soapbox, but I grew up in farm country in upstate New York, lots of cornfields, hay fields, dairy products, and with the nature of the necessity of things having to be shipped in such a great distance, a gallon of milk that's produced 10 miles from the grocery store it's being sold in costs more for the consumer now, way more now than it did 30 years ago when I was a kid. It's baffling to me that milk is $5 a gallon in a place where it's made. Why is that? So, I mean, there's lots of questions I think that us as consumers need to really start asking. Why is that? And when you start asking enough questions, it becomes part of the public conversation, and then that gets the attention of the people whom we elect. And that's the only way change comes, is if you start to collectively question not just a little group, the entire society. And it's tough because they live their lives, they have jobs, they have children, they have responsibilities, and in some instances they have to worry about where the next mortgage payment is coming from. So they're not worried about where their apple is coming from, as long as it's there and it's fresh and we can eat it. But I think that we can shift into, there are beautiful farms, around here, both outside the city of Seattle and then a little bit south. Lots of urban gardening is happening, and I think that's a great thing. I think if you can maybe just grow some herbs in a small little area in your little apartment or your condo because you don't have a yard, doesn't mean you can't have anything. It's just, think about the money you'd save if you grew your own herbs even, and then translate that into 2 tomato plants in the summer. Which leads you to learn how to can, and I don't say learn, it's mostly relearn, because everybody used to do that. My grandmother, my mother, my mother still cans all the time. Big garden and the whole nine. It's great. And she's inspired me to want to do more, and now I have a little boy. I want to teach him how to cook, not for a vocation, but so he can be self-sufficient, so he is not dependent on someone else. He can depend on himself. And I think that all of us as a culture are fundamentally shifting towards eating more at home rather than eating out, learning how to do things. Especially kind of the millennial generation is really, they have so many things at their disposal that I'm not that much older than them, but I could only dream of the things that we have at our disposal now. I was the kid that would go to the record store every week of my allowance and get that out. Now it's like, download, I can just get the popular song and, whatever. And there's so many applications where you can keep everything digitally. And I just think that there's a movement now to kind of, it's trendy to want to learn how to can and do crafts. But I think people are finding that once they do it, like, they really enjoy it. And it's once you get past that initial hurdle to just kind of take the plunge, you can see how much enjoyment you get. And that I grew this, and now I'm eating it. So that's the shift that I'm not trying to lead a revolution by any means, but I can only lead by example, and that's the way I've always worked. So. Let's see, an IPA, a bourbon. No, I think, boy, that's tough. I think I would have to have some wonderful cured meats from Spain and manchego cheese. Spending time in Spain for 2 weeks on a culinary tour was one of the most phenomenal points of my career. So it has a fond memory, and it was delicious. We had pork in some form every day, all meals, breakfast, lunch, and of course tapas. So that would be a start. And to appease my mother, I'd have to have a fruit and a vegetable for the next meal, with probably just a very simple center cut filet, from beef tenderloins. So just medium rare, nothing fancy. Maybe a baked potato, some fresh asparagus from the garden. Maybe some sort of fruit dish too, so I can nurture that. Like I said, appease mom. And then dessert, boy, just a scoop of vanilla ice cream will do me fine. I think very humble, very simple, very well done, and that'll do. I think I don't even need any. Well, my mom's bread has to be with the main course, so she better still be around when this event happens.